Why are you trying to make an already difficult situation worse? Tobe cannot afford to get the items on that list. Why would you ask him to pay 10 million naira for my bride price? Akuna, said her father, if he cannot afford 10 million naira or the items on the list, then he should go elsewhere and get a bride. You are a graduate. I did not spend all that money training you in school only for a mechanic dropout to come and marry. But Papa, let this be the last time I talk about this. Umuimo was a village that took great pride in the knowledge that her marriage system was different from that of the neighboring villages. Marrying a woman from Umuimo was a tall order. The standard list contained numerous items which had to be brought in outrageous quantities. And the bride price was ridiculously high, almost as if the woman was being sold. For any young man to marry a woman from the village, he had to work extra hard to save money, enough to afford the items on the list, plus the bride price. Except, of course, the young man in question was very rich. For years and years, the people accepted this way of life. But what it meant was that only the rich could afford to marry from among them. A lot of young men who could not afford it had to take wives from neighboring villages. The king and his elders did not see anything wrong with this. Even when the youths had complained and raised the issue severally, the king and his elders said there was nothing they could do. It was tradition and they were meant to abide by it. Akuna and Tobechukwu were childhood friends. Since those days, they had playfully said they would marry each other. As they grew and became wiser, their friendship deepened and their bond became stronger. Before long, the relationship blossomed into love. But you see, Akuna's family was okay financially. Tobe's family was not. They were poor. His father was a small scale farmer. He was only able to sell whatever was left after his family had taken what was needed. His mother was a petty trader. Tobe's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Okonkwo, had 6 children, Tobe being the eldest. Growing up, Tobe and his siblings witnessed the constant financial struggle. His parents could only afford to send them to school up to primary 6. After Tobe finished his primary education, he became an apprentice with Mazi Ude, who owned a mechanic workshop. After 7 years of apprenticeship, Mazi Ude settled him. He got Tobe a space to enable him start up his own workshop and also gave him some amount of money. Akuna was a very beautiful young lady. After her secondary school in Umuimo, her parents sent her to live with her aunt in the city. From there, she did well in her studies and went on to graduate from the university where she studied nursing. Throughout her years in the city, she never forgot Tobe. She had promised him that she would return, and she did. Her father, Mazi Udoji, had been very upset. He wanted more for Akuna, who was his only child. He never wanted her to return to the village. But Akuna had said her home was wherever Tobe was. It was 4 months after Akuna returned from the city. She had gotten a job as a nurse at the village clinic. She went to speak with her father and told him that Tobe would be coming with his kinsmen to ask for her hand in marriage. Mazi Udoji was furious. What are you doing with that wretched primary school dropout? I sent you to the city because I wanted you out of this village. I did not spend my money sending you to the university so that you can end up with a wretched village mechanic. His wife, Nena, had pleaded with her husband and asked her to receive the guests, to give the youngsters a chance at love. Maziu Doji would not hear of it. He went to see his kingsmen on the matter. They advised him to take it easy, that everything would sort itself out. The long-awaited day came. Tobe, his father and kinsmen, went to see Akona's family. All through the meeting, Maziu Doji said nothing. His kingsmen did all the talking, at the end of which they accepted and presented the list of items to be brought on the traditional wedding day. When Tobe and his family got back home, they looked at the list. Maziu Doji and his kingsmen had doubled the items on the standard list. It was obvious he did not want Tobe to marry his daughter. "Don't worry, Papa," said Tobe. "I will go and speak with Mazi. He is a reasonable man. I'm sure he will do something about it." "Tobe Chuku," said Mazi Okonkwo. "I warned you from the beginning. I told you to pick a wife from Ozala, Umudim, Umuokoro, anywhere else but Umuimo. We can't afford it. Marrying from here is only for the rich. Papa, I love Akuna and I can't just marry any other woman. She's the only woman for me." "Tobechuku," said one of his uncles, "your father is right. We can't afford to marry a woman from this land. We don't have the money to provide even 1/4 of what is on that list. And to even think that Maziu Doji and his kinsmen would double the items that on its own is extravagant is inhuman. Is this the kind of family you want to marry from?" "Uncle," said Tobe, "don't worry. Everything will be fine. Akuna is a good woman. She knows I am poor, but she loves me regardless. To think that she left for the city, abandoned the wealth and glamour, and still returned to me speaks a lot about her character. You have a point there, my son. But no man is an island. You can't marry a woman without her father's blessing. If Maziu Doji doesn't want you to marry his daughter, there's nothing you can do about it." After the king's men left, Tobe was worried. What was he to do? The next day, he went to the clinic to see Akona. They arranged for a meeting that evening at Tobe's house. Akona was furious when she learnt about the extravagant list. She confronted her father, Maziu Doji, about it. "Papa, why are you trying to make an already difficult situation worse? Tobe cannot afford to get the items on that list. Why would you ask him to pay 10 million naira for my bride price?" "Akuna," said her father, "if he cannot afford 10 million naira or the items on the list, then he should go elsewhere and get a bride. You are a graduate. I did not spend all that money training you in school only for a mechanic dropout to come and marry. But Papa, let this be the last time I talk about this," scolded her father and walked away. Akuna sat down in tears. Her mother walked in and tried to comfort her, promising to reason with her father on the issue. Tobe and Eze were best friends. They had been since childhood. Eze was also poor, but unlike Tobe, never had the opportunity to go to school. He was a carpenter and also the youth leader of Umuimo. When he heard of Tobe's plight, he was furious. Why have we the youths tolerated this issue for a very long time? The young men of Umuimo can no longer marry our women because of the high cost of marriage. Only the rich are opportuned to do that. Why do we have to go to neighboring villages to pick wives when our women are available? This has to stop. We have to put an end to this segregation now or never. That week, Eze rallied the youths to discuss the matter at hand. They decided to send delegates to the Igwe and his cabinet. Meanwhile, Tobe had agreed with Akunna that he should speak with her father. Mazi Udoji was not very welcoming. He made it clear that not one item would be subtracted from the list, neither will the bride price be reduced. He advised Tobe to leave his daughter and go marry from the neighboring villages, since he could not meet up with the standard that had been set. Eze and the delegates had been to see the Igwe and his cabinet. They demanded that the wedding list and bride price be adjusted. The Igwe and his chiefs said it was not possible, that their system of marriage had been so since the days of their forefathers. Then the youths declared an ultimatum. The Igwe and his cabinet was given 3 weeks to adjust the list or face the wrath of the youths. It's been 2 weeks since the youths went to see the Igwe and his cabinet. Tobe and Akunna had decided to wait for the outcome of the meeting. Akunna came back from work one day to meet Ekene and his kinsmen in her father's house. He had come to seek her hand in marriage. Ekene was the son of Mazi Udensi, one of the richest men in Ozala, the nearest neighboring village. He was the biggest auto spare parts dealer in that area. His son Ekene, like Tobe, stopped schooling at primary school level and joined his father in the business. At 28 years old, he had made a good fortune for himself. Akunna's father, Mazi Udoji, was very glad. He had presented them with his most expensive drink and even ordered his wife to prepare nkwobi. He called Akunna to greet them and also went ahead to tell her that Ekene had come to seek her hand in marriage, which he had accepted. Akunna's mom, Nnenna, had begged Akunna to play along in order not to anger her father. She promised, once again, to speak with her husband regarding the issue. And she did. But Mazi Udoji could not be swayed. He said that was the kind of man he wanted for his daughter, that Ekene was the man he was giving his daughter to. Akunna was heartbroken. She had no idea what to do. Her father was bent on ruining her happiness. That night, she went to see Tobe. He felt very bad that he was being deprived the opportunity of marrying someone he loved. He was silent throughout Akunna's rant and never said a word. It's been 4 weeks since the youths visited the Igwe to make their demands and still had gotten no reasonable answer. So they put their plans in action. Mazi Udoji and Ekene's kinsmen had fixed the traditional wedding date. Guests had been invited from within and outside the village. The wedding day came. Visitors from within had arrived, but none from outside the village. Mazi Udoji and his kinsmen had waited. Still, they did not arrive. So they sent 2 messengers to go to Ozala to find out what the delay was. An hour later, the 2 men ran back to Mazi Udoji to report that the borders of the village had been blocked by the youths of Umuimo and the visitors were not allowed to pass. The youths were demanding they pay a due of 5 million for choosing to marry a daughter of Umuimo. Mazi Udoji and 2 of his kinsmen went to report the situation to the Igwe, who in turn sent his guards to the border to arrest the situation. On reaching the borders, the guards tried to forcefully disperse the youths, but they were outnumbered. The Igwe then asked to speak with the youth's leader. Eze and his delegates went to the palace to speak with the Igwe. The Igwe warned Eze and his delegates about their foolish act and ordered them to leave the border immediately. Igwe greeted Eze. We brought our complaints to your throne and requested solution, but we were dismissed and ignored. We, the youths, have decided that for an outsider to marry a daughter of Umuimo, he will pay a due starting from 5 million upward, depending on how rich he is. Since we are being denied the honor of marrying our daughters, the money would serve as compensation for every male youth to better his life and maybe one day be worthy enough to marry a daughter of Umuimo. The youths could not be patronized. They remained at the border until eventually Ekene paid the sum of 5 million in cash to the youths before they were allowed to pass. It was already getting late. The visitors and in-laws from Ozala were already tired and upset. The wedding was to be hurriedly done. The items were submitted, checked, and the bride price was paid. It was time to receive the bride, but the bride was nowhere in sight. Mazi Udoji was furious. He sent men to Tobe's house. Tobe was at home, but Akuna was not there. He said he hadn't laid eyes on her for over 2 weeks. They searched for her everywhere in the village, but Akuna could not be found. Ekene and his kinsmen demanded that the bride price be refunded along with the items, saying they were no longer interested in the marriage. Mazi Udoji pleaded with them and promised to bring their bride over the following day. Akuna's disappearance and her failed marriage ceremony was the talk of the whole village and beyond. The disgrace and shame it brought to Udoji and his entire kinsmen. 2 days later, Akuna was still not found. Mazi Udoji had contacted his sister in the city, but she too did not hear from or see Akuna. Mazi Udoji and a few of his kinsmen went to Ozala, bearing the items and the bride price. They apologized for the inconvenience and shame that had been caused. Ekene and his kinsmen had demanded that the money paid to the youths be refunded, but the youths of Umuimo said it wasn't possible. The money was non-refundable. 1 week had passed since Akuna disappeared. Nena had found a note she left behind. It said she had gone to the city and would not return until her father accepts her relationship with Tobe and cuts down on the marriage list. She told them not to bother looking for her because she wasn't going to Auntie Ife's place. Mazi Udoji was livid. He blamed his wife Nena and even accused her of aiding Akuna. After she was reported missing, the Igwe had arrested Tobe and held him in custody, but when the note was found, he had no reason to keep him, so he let him go. 2 weeks after the marriage incident, Akuna got message across to Tobe. She told him of her whereabouts and promised to return when her father had reasoned with her. Princess Uru was the only female child of Igwe Okocha. Her wedding to rich businessman Ochemba of Umokoro village was to take place, but his family had sent 3 of his kinsmen to the Igwe, saying they no longer wished to take the princess as wife because they didn't want to experience the same thing the visitors from Ozala experienced. Igwe Okocha was disappointed. Princess Uru was heartbroken. She cried for days and demanded that her father found a lasting solution to the demands of the youths. Her father, the Igwe, tried to console her and promised that a better suitor would come for her. But none ever came. not for Princess Uru or any other maiden of Umuimo. 1 year had passed, and not a single wedding ceremony had taken place in Umuimo. 2 years passed, and so did the third year. The princess and the daughters of Umuimo started to get restless. Even Igwe Okocha was not at ease. He called his cabinet for a meeting. Our daughters have become Nnagano. That is not a good report. No daughter of Umuimo has gotten married in the last 3 years. My princess inclusive. Igwe, said one of his Ichies, you are right. We have been very unfair to our sons and now our daughters too. If we do nothing about this, our girls will live and die as old maids in our house. Tradition was made to guide men, and it can also be changed or abolished completely if it no longer serves a positive purpose. And so, on that day, the marriage list was adjusted, slashed down by 3/4, so that every son of Umuimo was able to afford the marriage and marriage rights in the land. The bride price was no longer fixed. As against 5 million, the groom would be asked to present whatever he valued his bride for. And so, after nearly 4 years of no marriage celebration in the land of Umuimo, Akonna and Tobe celebrated their love in the presence of everyone. They heralded a new era in Umuimo, the era where not only the rich and famous could take brides from the land, but every son of Umuimo could afford to choose a bride and carry out his marriage rites. Lessons to learn. Change begins when we recognize there's a problem and make efforts to solve them. Be brave enough to stand and fight for what you believe is right. If the youth of Umuimo did not react, the absurd tradition would have continued, depriving them the honor of marrying from their land. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then please don't forget to give us a thumbs up. You can also share this video with your family or your friends, anyone you think will enjoy it too. Leave me a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you took away from the story. I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye.